Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. I am Mega Freak 400, and today we are heading to our last dungeon, Ganon's Tower. And here are... I don't know what their names are, I forgot, but they're the little horsey guys who actually I think you fight them in certain areas in the original Zelda, and they were... Actually, no, it was the Dark Nuts that were annoying, but they were also kind of annoying too. The ones that had, I think at one point you try and get one of the best swords, and there's a blue one that's attacking you. And so yeah, the maidens who, keep in mind, we've been keeping them in our pocket basically this entire time. That's kind of creepy, actually, that you've been storing girls in your pocket for the entire game. Actually, that's pretty cool, actually. No. But yeah, Ganon's Tower is now open, and we can now head to Ganon. Now this place is long. In fact, this is going to be the first and only dungeon in which I'm not going to have an entire video. Why? Because it would have been about 30 minutes long, and that's way too long for one video in my opinion. I mean, I could have, but I'd rather just split it up personally. Because 30 minutes, to sit through a 30-minute area. Now, it's not like, it would be shorter, I was just trying to get all the items. Basically, you have two sides of this dungeon. You can either go left or right. The left side, takes you one way, the right side takes you another way, obviously. And the way you pick decides whether you get the map or the compass. Now, I don't use either the map or the compass, I just like having them because, you know, they're cool to have. But yeah, you go one way, you get one item, and then you can go the other way as well, or you can choose and go and get the dungeon item and the key you need. And then you have the top half of the tower. The top half, of course, is, you know, at that point, the whole bottom half is getting all the items, and the top half is just heading towards the battle at the top. But, this place is just, I don't know, it's not that bad, it's just kind of annoying and long. That's most of it, it's just long and obnoxious. But at this point we do have everything in the game. We have all the items, we have, well, technically, we have the dungeon item of this, but we will have everything pretty soon. But aside from that, though, we have everything else. We have all our hearts, though. We have a full 2 bars of hearts, which is awesome. And there's another chest with a key. So, last episode I talked about characters. Now, I want to talk about this time is why it's why I find it important to have a good character and story. And this is, again, it depends on various factors. For example, this kind of game, like this adventure style game, I feel when you have a good story, like, you know, the 2D games, not necessarily, you don't necessarily need a story, but especially with 3D games, again, I keep that whole, well, I'm not going to dwell on that because I've already said this several times, so you know my feelings on the whole 3D, and if you don't, you may want to watch previous episodes of this project, which you probably should have anyway if you want to watch it in sequential order. Unless you're just like, unless you're just crazy and you like to go like, okay, I'm going to watch it backwards, and watch how the entire project, you know what, I challenge someone to do that, watch the entire project backwards for no apparent reason. I don't know why you would do that, besides the fact that I challenge you. But, anyway, nonlinear versus linear games. This has been a debate that most of the time ends with people, or most of the time people find linear games to be bad. Now, I've said before I like linear games, and basically what I mean by linear games is, or what people say by linear games is a game where you're basically forced to go a certain path, more so than with nonlinear games where you're kind of more free to do what you need to do. Like, Super Metroid is a good example of a nonlinear game. You have a little bit more freedom in Super Metroid, because you have basically all games have you have to go to point A to point B for the most part. It's you could decide, you know, it changes exactly what point B or point A is, but there's always, you're going from one point to another, and Super Metroid has that too. You could say you start at this point and you have to go to like the first boss, which is Kraid. Now with nonlinear games, you have more freedom to explore, and you have more freedom to explore, and you don't have to go there right away. Whereas with linear games, you're more or less, you're just following a path. There's not really any exploring necessarily. Now, honestly, I feel that's, you know, calling nonlinear and linear is honestly a little bit too, it's honestly way too generalizing. For example, Zelda can be considered nonlinear, at the same time it can also be considered linear too, depending on how you look at it. You could say it's nonlinear because it allows you to explore, but you could say it's linear because you know, you have a set path to go. I mean, like, with some games that people consider non-linear, I think Super Mario 64 is one of them. You know, you have a variety of ways to get to the goal. For example, you can enter the first mission of some stars and get a different star. You don't have to get the star that they're asking you to get. But, you know, other non-linear games, it's just more of you can just explore more. So really, I feel labeling a game as non-linear or linear is misleading. Here's what's not, at least for me. Games all have a point A to point B. Now, just going to point A to point B can be boring. It can be boring, you know, even with great gameplay. It can also, you know, it can just be like, well, I'm just mindlessly walking to this point. Now, how you make it interesting is where you get into like nonlinear and linear. Some games, they make it interesting by allowing you more freedom to explore and do your own choosing, and in doing so, it doesn't feel like you're just going from here to here. It feels like you're, you know, a part of an adventure, that you're deciding your own fate. You know, some of that stuff, you know, that, and people like that. They like to have more freedom to do what they want to do and not just follow what's going on. But that's not the only way you can make a game, you know, more interesting. Music can make a game more interesting. For example, and I use Galaxy for this. People say, well, it's linear. Well, yeah, you could say it's linear in that you don't really have as much freedom to explore. And I think, again, linear is misleading. It's more of, or not linear, yeah, linear is more misleading. I think it's more of you don't get to explore, or you don't have as much freedom to do exploring. What you could say is linear, but again, I feel it's a little bit misleading. But, you know, the music in Galaxy and the visuals in Galaxy, they keep you, you know, there's a lot of poetry and motion in the game, and those help you keep the game flowing. Another thing that definitely keeps, you know, just adding some challenges. There's various things that you can do to keep a game, you know, challenges in general keep a game flowing. If you were just walking to left or right and just mindlessly hacking things, that gets boring after a while. Adding a bit of challenge, again, Galaxy does this as well, or Galaxy 2 and Galaxy as well, you know, spices things up. You know, keeping things a little bit inconsistent. You know, when you say linear, I feel like it's like you're just walking left to right. That's not what they mean, but, you know, basically, yeah, every game has the basic, you know, go to point A to point B, and difficulty can mix it up, music can add to it and make it more interesting to get to point A to point B, and same with the visuals. The other thing that can do that is story. Story and characters. And Zelda has a story. The Zelda series, you know, a lot of Zelda games, especially the newer ones, have quite a bit of story and characters, and that's how you, and this is what Majora's Mask, I feel, did really right. I know I keep praising Majora's Mask, and it's not the only game in the Zelda franchise to do that. I feel Twilight Princess did it to an extent as well. I feel Wind Waker definitely did it, so it's not like, in fact, I think Wind Waker had better characters than Majora's Mask, so it's not like I'm, you know, like, Majora's Mask, it's God. No, I'm not saying that. Though it is, but, Majora's Mask had a great flow. It had a whole, the flow that it had was, you'd start, like, for example, you start in Clock Tower and you go to, like, you want to get to the first dungeon, and finish the first dungeon, right? And instead of just being like, you're going to the first dungeon, what you had was, well, to get to the first dungeon, you have to help out various characters who have personalities and problems. You help them out. For example, you have the Deku Palace, you have to go through that, and you learn of their issues and the monkeys' issues. Or if you go with the Goron side quest, you have to find the father for the son. And not only does it make you feel more immersed into the game, it's like, well, I'm not just going here to here, I feel like I'm a part of this adventure and I'm helping out. You know, it doesn't feel like I'm just using these people and these tools to get what I need to get. Like, I feel like it does a little bit in Ocarina of Time, and even in this game, too. This game, again, it does feel like you're just going from point A to point B. It doesn't, you know, I'm gonna say, Majora's Mask, I feel, is better in that aspect, that it does, the story is, the immersion that the story, creates is something I really appreciate from Majora's Mask, that this game doesn't have, nor does it really try to have. And again, I don't feel all games need a great story or great characters necessarily. I feel, you know, anything I ever say is not to apply to everything. It only applies to, certain cases, and I feel we need just as much as we need detailed characters in games. We also need games that just have just gameplay. We don't. Not every game needs to be exactly the same. We don't need all games to have epic characters, epic gameplay, all this. Sometimes it's good to have variety. And in fact, it is good to have variety. But yeah, Majora's Mask did a great job of stringing events together and immersing you into the game quite a bit, and it made you feel part of it, which that helps. In like you could make the claim that, and it's not really, but you can make the claim that Majora's Mask is nonlinear and that you're going to point A to point B, which you kind of do. But part of the reason why Majora's Mask is less nonlinear is the sheer fact that there's so much to do in the game. There's so many. You of course have the chance to explore, but there's so much to do in the game, and again, how the characters string the story together helps in that aspect. Now, because I feel like I'm being, because I feel a little guilty for leaving it out of the rant party, I will now rant about Wind Waker. Wind Waker's characters are like just fantastically done. And I don't really need to go into much more detail because that's they're fantastically done. They're just really good, great characters. And the main thing about that, and I mentioned last time about villains. Ganon is a villain in that game that I sympathize with him, and at the same time I hate him, and I hate what he's doing. His actions have an impact. His actions are causing little girls to be taken from their homes, and it has an impact on the characters. As opposed to Ocarina of Time, where it seems like everyone, for the most part, is hunky-dory, even if they're stuck in a cage and going to be fed to a dragon. Again, I don't hate Ocarina of Time. It's so easy to not make fun of, but to pick on its character because they're so weak. And they weren't necessarily trying to be strong. Again, the gameplay was the main focus. It's so easy to pick on it that I sometimes lose track of mind. That the game, I lose track of what my real focus is. So again, just for anyone who doesn't realize this, I don't hate Ocarina of Time. I do feel bad that I keep picking on it. But mostly, I'm mostly using it as an example of what story can and can't do. And because Ocarina of Time doesn't have as good characters, it doesn't have the strength that I feel some of the other Zelda games does. It has great gameplay, but it doesn't have the strength to keep me as... And granted, some people don't really care that much about characters, and that's not that big of an aspect. And also, when you play a game the second time, a lot of times you're just rushing through the game. So, for a lot of people, the characters don't matter all that much. So, but, they matter to me. So for me, personally, I do like, I like Majora's Mask better in that aspect because of the characters, and Wind Waker as well. Wind Waker did a great job especially the Wind Waker's strong point was not only did it have great characters, but the expressions they use made them feel more real. And you could be like, well, they're cartoony. Well, yes, but it doesn't matter what graphical style they were rendered in; they still feel more real. They have real expressions. I almost feel like. Actually, Twilight Princess, I think, actually, they have some expressions. I haven't played that game in a while, but I feel Wind Waker's more exaggerated expressions allow for you to truly feel sympathy for the characters more so than the very subtle expressions. Sometimes exaggeration is actually more realistic than trying to obtain realism. This is something that you learn in art, is sometimes you need to exaggerate things to make a point. So having a very subtle smile is not necessarily going to make as much a point as a very, exaggerated smile. So I do feel at some points, the art style of Wind Waker, is it unrealistic in that no one in the real world looks like that? Well, sure, of course, but I actually feel it almost has a bit more realism in terms of how it definitely has some of the most realistic and most sympathetical characters in any of the Zelda games. So in that sense, it's quite a realistic game in that, because of that. But yeah, the expressions really help in Wind Waker. And here we have these guys. We haven't seen you for a while, and they're just as easy. Actually, in fact, easier because we now have the silver bow and this bow, or silver arrows for our bow, and this bow allows us to kill them in one hit, which is kind of pathetic. In fact, I think ironically, the sword. Well, I don't know how many swings they took at the sword in the last when we first fought them, but either way, they're very easy. We have stronger weapons, so therefore they're pretty pathetic. But yeah, it is kind of nice to have the little throwback to these bosses, and adding them on an icy floor does make this battle a little bit more tricky, especially at this part. But even so, it's still pathetically pathetic. But yeah, story and characters, basically, to summarize that whole rant of sorts, story and characters can, you know, help the flow of the game and help immerse you into the game. But they're not, you know, again, it depends on the kind of game. I feel with RPGs you definitely need them though, because the gameplay especially can be very repetitive, so story and characters help break that repetitiveness up. You know, balance is key. Balance is the key to everything, I feel. Now again, how much balance you have, I'm not saying 50-50 even perfectly balanced, I'm just saying balance in how you do things. You don't want to, you know, over-focus on something. And, you know, you're free to disagree. If you think that I'm being, you know, phrasing like saying, oh, well, no, I disagree with you, Mega. Characters aren't that important in helping the flow game. They don't matter. I mean, they don't matter much to me, so I don't care about them. You know, that's fine. I'd rather you, I don't want people to just to listen to me and be like, oh yeah, he's right, and then just blindly follow me. I mean, if you agree with me, you agree with me. I don't like it when or I want people to formulate their own opinions, you know, because I formulate my own opinions. I share my opinions, and I like to have feedback of what people think and have discussions, because it helps my opinions grow and it helps others. And here we have the red male, the strongest male in the game. I think 1/4 damage instead of a half. That's all the time I have. It's been Maker 400 reminding you, sandwich.